Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Yes, so I think as Annette has indicated, there are 4 of us who will present, and we will all present different facets of the work of the GoDown. I am one of the founding directors of the GoDown. I've been with the institution since its inception. So I'm the dinosaur here, and I will use the space that I have, the time that I have, to probably just introduce a little bit about the work of the institution, and one of the projects that has sort of set us on the direction that makes us, I think, an interesting subject for study as an initiative in social entrepreneurship. And then I will open out to my colleagues to then share other aspects that bring out this characteristic of the GoDown. So I think one of the things that is important is to appreciate context. On the slide that I've shared with you, I've located you in the blue. You're sitting somewhere there in Europe, and we're sitting somewhere in the bottom there in Africa. And I think that this for us as the GoDown is important because collaboration is a key principle of our work, as we have, sort of walked through 20 years of practice and trying to understand the foundations of our own practice. And collaboration, whether it is collaboration within the continent, collaboration within the city, or collaboration across the globe, is something that we really value because there's always things to learn and share and exchange with others. But I think the other thing around context, of course, is that practice becomes specific and particular to the social reality of the space in which you are sitting. And we are sitting in Nairobi, and we are sitting in Kenya, which has a very particular history and dynamic, and our practice and our work is responsive to that dynamic. So the GoDown is now 20 years old, and the nation of Kenya is only just 3 times older than the GoDown, 60 years. So when you look at the institution, it seems as though 20 years is a long time, but when you look at that against the age of the nation, of the independent nation, 60 years, then you can see that both are actually very, very young indeed. So just to explain how we work, again, our practice has evolved over time. And when we started off by responding to what we heard were the needs of artists at the time, which was simply to try and find a platform or a space from which they could produce, they could make work, and hopefully from which they could also share and stage or exhibit that work for audiences. So it was a very sort of basic formula, if I can call it. But this foundation, I think, gave us the opportunity to really begin to think about the direction to which we have evolved today. So when I look at our work today, I think it sits across sort of 3 large programmatic areas. So one is cultural expression, which is supporting artistic development and disseminating this artistic expression. So if a dancer needs space to rehearse and make work, the GoDown provides that. If a visual artist needs a studio and then a gallery afterwards to be able to present the work, the GoDown supports that. But then in doing that work of supporting artists, I think one of the things that was very clear around our context was that the environment was not fully enabling for culture to flourish. For those who may be familiar with this, of course, we were not always a very democratic space. And so the arts was one way to begin to think about expanding democracy within the country. And in doing that, we engaged in a lot of advocacy, cultural advocacy, which directly also impacts the question of expanding democratic space. So how do you advocate for policies that really support freedom of expression, that support access to cultural life for all citizens, and so on and so forth? So that's one pillar. Another pillar of our work is one that has evolved over time, which is really concerning ourselves with how creative expression or artistic expression connects with community, with people? How does it also become part of their own enrichment and education and development? So the question of access and the kind of experiences that we can bring to community is another part of our work. And then the third part really is an outcome of being in practice. Because we're in practice, we generate knowledge, and we are trying to see how to be more systematic and strategic in these learnings, these insights, this knowledge that we're generating. How do we conserve them? How do they become part of our endogenous knowledge production? And then how do we disseminate this knowledge as well? Now I'll try and move on to the next slide. Oh, have I frozen? My slide is not moving. There we go. Okay. So really, when we look at this, I think we could say that we're straddling two aspects of practice. One is the business of the arts, because we are founded on arts and culture. But the other is how arts and culture is now intersecting with the emergence of the nation and the making of Kenyan communities today. So we broadly describe that as culture and nation making. I think it's important to give you a visual of what we're talking about when we're talking about the business of the arts and the space that Mbugua will be speaking about a little bit more. This is an image of the GoDown Arts Center that we have moved from. We're currently in a much smaller space, because the space that you see on screen is one that we have embarked on developing and scaling up. But you can see that the layout and the setup of the space is really very conventional if you're looking at a space that supports artistic practice. That it is a space that sits in the industrial area, south of the railway. It was a workhouse, and it carries visual artist studios on one side to the southern side, and artist organization offices to the northern side. And then towards the bottom of the screen, which is the western side, again, you have offices and rehearsal spaces. But in the center of this space is where you have performance and rehearsal spaces, exhibition, but also a space where community can meet, which is a refreshment space, an arts gallery. So this is the space that the GoDown has been working in for the last 17 years. And then 3 years ago, we moved out of it to begin to think about its redevelopment and sitting in this space. Really predominantly have been the visual arts, music, film and video, and contemporary dance have been the major activities that we have been supporting. But it doesn't mean that the space has not been open to those who are working in other arts disciplines at all. It's just that the focus of the GoDown has been those particular three areas. Now, this is a map of Nairobi. When we began to present programs that artists were creating to publics in that space that I've just shown you, we found that the numbers were smaller than we had anticipated. And we began to ask ourselves why this hunger, this need for artists to have stages and exhibition spaces was not being taken up by communities and by audiences and the public as was anticipated or projected or assumed by artists and by ourselves. So we decided to step into community. And this was around about 2010, 2009, 2010, we began to sort of look at engaging in community to begin to understand the dynamic of community and whether that could give us more insight around how we need to move our practice in a way that is more meaningful and relevant for community. I won't go through the detail of that, but I'll just sort of say that one of the, I think, turning points was a festival that we then started in 2012 called the Nainihu Festival. This is a festival that encouraged community to co-create with the GoDown in understanding the cultural assets of the neighborhoods of all of these different, wonderful, vibrant neighborhoods of Nairobi, and to spend a week creating a program of experience and presentation that would begin to give the identity of the neighborhood to, of course, neighborhood residents, but to those coming from other neighborhoods. And this process for us was one of trying to understand how the public sees themselves within the city, how they see cultural assets within the city, how they see culture for themselves, and how they would like to engage with it. And this for us was to give us then insight around how our own practice and our own programming might begin to move forward. I think some of the things that came out of this, and Mbugua will touch on that, and Rehema will also touch on that, are some principles or some insights that have begun to form the ethos of our own practice. I know the next slide is full of text, and I don't expect for you to read all of this text, but to just sort of share that some of the things that we saw over there was, one, that when you brought people into the process, there was a sense of ownership, a sense of agency that you began to build in them, a sense of buy-in, so that you could then work together things beyond this festival. And I think when Mbugua shares, you'll see that the redevelopment of the GoDown is really harnessing that ownership and that buy-in to now work together to imagine a new GoDown. But the other important point was the collaborations and the networks that Nainihu also began to open up with city officials and leadership in neighborhoods. So those who have more influence within a neighborhood, and it might be the city ward representative, or it might be a particular community-based organization, what sorts of relationships can you build with these influential institutions or organizations as well, or leaders, so that again, as you move forward, there is a sense of collaboration and of partnership and collegiality. So Nainihu also enabled us to begin to harness these moving forward. But I think for the GoDown itself, it was also a learning around what is the mission of the institution? Are we a project-based organization, or do we really have a mission? What are we about? How would we like to see change and to be an instrument of change as well? And therefore, what kind of capacities do we need to build as staff? And then, of course, more importantly, what kind of programming does this begin to suggest around the work that we do? I think in summary then, and again, I'm just being very quick so that the meat of the matter, which my other three colleagues will deal with, we can get into, is that when we look at the trajectory of our work over 20 years, I think we have moved from the idea of donor funding to thinking about how can we find models of endogenous sustainability for ourselves. And it doesn't mean that endogenous sustainability does not require impetus or collaboration from those beyond our borders, but how do we do this in a way that helps to build agency and cultural confidence among ourselves? But then, of course, the other important thing that we've learned is how do we work with people and recognize that people are reservoirs of knowledge and instruments of change in themselves, and to be able to co-create with them and collaborate with them effectively and continuously and constantly in the work that we do. And in doing that, what is an ethos that begins to build around our practice that informs our work moving forward, a sort of a value foundation that begins to shape the institution and its own programming? And then ultimately, how are these questions of ownership and identity and belonging conducive to endogenous, locally rooting the work that we do and building sustainable futures moving forward? So I think I will leave it there so that Mbugua can now talk specifically around the next phase of the GoDown and how, of course, this process of trying to understand the city and to bring people as collaborators is informing those next steps forward. And then Rehema will speak to a very specific part of that whole enterprise and Mbugua is about to share. And then my colleague Garnette will bring us back to this question of knowledge generation by looking at one specific program that the GoDown executes annually to develop the sector. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Joy, for that introduction. And yeah, so I'll just pick up from where Joy left off with the Nainihu program, which, as Joy explained, was about gathering the community to try and understand the city better. So when it came to now the GoDown itself, getting into the process of thinking about developing its property, it started again with a larger scale, but not quite city scale, more like the neighborhood scale. And it spent some time with its neighborhood community, studying what it is that makes that neighborhood unique. And for those of you who've never been to Nairobi, the GoDown, if I don't know if you can see my cursor, is right here. It's south of the CBD. The CBD is up north here. And in between the central business district of Nairobi and the GoDown is the central Nairobi Central Station. So that makes it a very unique area because it's old industrial area, it's next to an old railway area, and it's also very close to the heart of the city, which meant that this neighborhood was ripe for change. It was ripe for regeneration, as has happened in other cities in the world. And so the GoDown, together with its partners, was very, very cognizant of this, and they started by looking at the neighborhood. It also happened that our neighbor to the north, the railway station, was also looking at developing its considerable land. And so the GoDown participated in those workshops as a neighbor. The railway also participated in the GoDown's workshops also as a neighbor. And eventually those studies led to the development of concepts and ideas, particularly two that are shown here on the left at the bottom, this idea of a cultural district. The area that the GoDown sits in is part of a very historical center of the city with lots of culture and heritage. And so the formation of a strong cultural district with a strong identity is very possible. At the same time, to connect the CBD and the GoDown, and to connect these cultural pieces of infrastructure, there was this idea, as is shown on the top left, of a cultural axis, an axis that runs right through this cultural district that can be used to develop and encourage more cultural actors to come into the neighborhood. So if I can move to the next slide. So that was a neighborhood. And then eventually from the neighborhood, we scaled down and started looking at the buildings. And some of the concepts that were also developed when we looked at the property is this concept of the fractals. Fractals are it's a naturally occurring pattern. It occurs in nature, in leaves, in cells, and other urban or human settlements. And so that idea was a very strong concept that our designers felt could be replicated in the design of the building. And so the design of the building follows this kind of fractal pattern, where you're moving from larger to smaller scales, going around a kind of central core. At the same time, the GoDown was also not just looking at the building, but also the two streets outside it, which you can see there. This idea of moving in and out of scales is present in the project throughout, from the city scale to the neighborhood scale to the building scale to the street scale, and then back again. It's present all throughout the project. For the building itself, in terms of the facilities that it has, Joy showed you earlier that the old GoDown was an old warehouse that was repurposed and converted into an art space with a number of artist studios and production facilities for artists. And the new building is the same. It's just that it has more facilities. So it's doubled the capacity of visual artist studios. It has doubled the capacity of spaces for creative businesses. It has doubled the capacity, actually tripled the capacity for performance, particularly theater performances. There are two separate performing performance spaces, among other spaces for the arts production, creation, and presentation. At the same time, as Joy mentioned, is digital, and the digital economy is a huge growth area, not only for the arts, but for the country and the region, and the space for tech-based workspaces within the complex. But at the same time, community facilities are very important. And so we have a library, we have a youth center, a children's space for children's programming. And these are dedicated spaces that the community said would like to see in this facility. And so they are sizable spaces spread within the complex that can cater to community. And finally, there's, of course, spaces for recreation. The whole building is designed as a public space, fully accessible by those able and disabled, and also a space for hanging out, for hospitality and retail. The other thing that, of course, we are cognizant more and more these days is the question of sustainability. And the GoDown took this concept of, or these principles of sustainability, and took a more holistic approach, where it didn't just look at sustainability from an environmental perspective, but also from an economic and a social perspective. And so these are some of the highlights that the project has included. So from the top right, environmental ones, where the building is designed to have a low climate impact, to boost the ecosystem services in the neighborhood, to encourage sustainable mobility, and for the neighborhood, the community, to adopt sustainable lifestyles. At the same time, because this was the transformation is at scaling up of the institution, the GoDown was very keen to ensure that its future is inclusive, has a robust business model, that the building is also flexible to change within, if 5 or 10 years from now, the needs of the artists or the community change, that the building can respond to those, the building is efficient, and that the GoDown itself is also funding and the project from diverse sources. At the same time, when it comes to social facilities, as I mentioned before, there are many community facilities within the building. And the reason for this broadening of sustainability is, again, to ensure that it's an inclusive process, and that communities is fully appreciative of and engaged in the future of this institution. As Joy mentioned earlier, the community, the GoDown learned that community is very important for this future sustainability, and it's also important as a reservoir of knowledge and capacity. The other aspect that the project encourages is, of course, collaboration. The project is a huge collaboration between different stakeholders. Here you can see a photo of our project team, some from Sweden, some from Kenya. We've also had partners coming from other countries around the world and have participated in the project in one way or another. And this, as you can see in this slide, is about the ethos of collaboration and inclusion, that everybody should have a say in the development of public spaces like the GoDown is designed to be, and of their community and of their neighborhood. And if you do that, then that makes the whole process very inclusive, very collaborative, and that means you build ownership and engagement with the community as you go along the way. And because of that, the GoDown project has won a number of awards. One very prestigious one is the World Architecture Festival Award. We won the Future Projects Culture category. And the judges said that the project won because of the design, but also because of its very successful community engagement activities. At the same time, and as my colleague Rehema will expound, together with her city, our street project has been identified as a global partnership project within the Her City platform. And most recently, within the Nairobi County, which is our local authority here in Nairobi, we are just about to begin a strong partnership with the county. Our project has been identified and designated as a flagship project for the next 5 years within the county's development plans. And those are huge wins for the project and recognition for the ethos of collaboration and community engagement. I will allow Rehema to go into more detail about the street design, but thank you very much again for the opportunity.
So I'll be taking you through the Her City, Her Streets project, and basically what Her City is a toolkit that UN Habitat developed, and it basically entails that women and girls, because they're vulnerable and they do not take up spaces the way men and boys do, should have a say in urban development. And so this toolkit particularly takes consideration that women should take part in initiatives within the city. And so Her City, Her Streets is a tool, or rather a project that the GoDown undertook beginning last year, in 2021. And since then, we have gone through different stages from design to implementation. So we are currently at the implementation level. And it was a very unique project in very many ways, but just to highlight on the highlights, it was very inclusive in the recruiting processes. So they did not just reach out to the people that they knew about, the very, very close members within the community or the neighborhood. GoDown took the initiative to go out and look for partners way wider, at a wider scope. So I got onto it as a participant in 2021, that is July, I think, through an organization called Women in Real Estate. So they called for volunteers to sign up and come for this project. That's how I got onboarded. And on there, I met people from literally everywhere, girls of different ages. I think the youngest was 11 years. We had students from both primary school, university, guys who had graduated. Also, street vendors were part of the process. So it is a very huge, diverse group of stakeholders. And the fact that everyone's needs was considered was a very special factor, at least to me, because then if I did not have a phone to use, let's say check up, use on an application, I was provided with that phone, which I do not know of very many projects or processes that are particular in such a manner. And then the design process was very iterative. So moving from after the girls had already assessed, which I will take you through the process of the entire project. After the girls had assessed and they had already presented their needs and ideas of what they thought should be done on that particular street that Mbugua showed you before, the experts took up the designs and the ideas, but it did not just stop at the first design outcome. They had to go back around 4 times to keep doing it, because then that's what the community wanted. And it gets to a point when experts realize that, okay, fine, yes, I have been educated. This is what I have. This is my skill. But if it is not functional and the community does not want that thing, go back to the drawing board and do the design afresh. So the process is basically of 9 blocks, which the 9 blocks have been fit into 3 categories. So the first one is assessment period, where we, the girls, had to go to the street, took up data, observed the street, talked to the people. You know, we had these questionnaires, both online and then the physical forms that you could fill in. Then there's the next step, which is the design process, which was broken into 2 segments. So the first one is an ideation stage, where you actually sat down after the assessment, and using specific tools which are very visual and highly interactive. Let's say there was Method Kit, which the fact that things were of different colors and there was color coding. Then there was Minecraft. If you are all very conversant with Minecraft, it's a very fun game. But then it was used in this project specifically for the girls to find it easy to give their ideas, but in the form of a game, which you don't have to be a skilled professional to be able to draw a tree or design a tree, but you can actually design one as a game. And so then the next category within the blocks is the implementation stage, which we are currently at. After the design went through with the experts, which we are currently at the detailed design process. It's very interesting to see how different community actors come into the implementation process. For example, what role does the national and county government play at the implementation stage? So that's basically just the process. Then I'll go over to the outcomes, which I would say this is just literally a drop in the ocean of the outcomes. So the fact that a sense of ownership was created, not just for the people who use the space daily, but for the people who are elsewhere. For example, I had never been to the GoDown before that, but the fact that I felt that, okay, fine, yes, this is a road that I have used for the past 10 months or so when we were going through this project, but it instilled or sparked a thing or an idea inside my head and made me realize that, yes, it is a space that I used to go through, but why do we just go through? It is actually mine. The fact that I am here as a citizen and I live here in Nairobi, it is my space and I should take up an initiative and own it to create change and make it better. It builds confidence amongst the ladies. I remember when we started off, we were all very timid, we were all very shy, we never wanted to talk to each other. We didn't know who was who and what people did. But at the end, you could see people being very, very active, girls being very confident about their answers and giving ideas in a very, very confident manner. And then the process is also a support or reference support, simply because you have gone through this project or the process in its entirety, and now you see that this is a way to elevate yourself as an individual, and not just yourself or your individual, your immediate family, but the community. So I remember one of the girls in this photo, she's actually there, she's called Sheila. She reached out to the GoDown after a few months and decided, okay, I think this was very impactful in my life. I need a recommendation letter so that I can go and do some community work. That's how impactful this thing was. And then also just to build on that is the skill generating process. And then it does create a value where people see the need to transfer their skills elsewhere. And then, as I mentioned earlier, it creates a drive to make the change. But among the experts specifically, they all had very, very interesting things to mention. One engineer said that they had never, over 30 years of working as an engineer here in Nairobi, he had never been on such a project that made him really think about the needs of the people. Another lady who is an urban planner said that she had been making assumptions for the longest time that some things should be done a certain way just because you learned them in school or you've been doing them a certain way for the longest time, but the reality on the ground is something very different. And then this project also is a model for other cultural centers and as a culture of change. For example, people now start to see the value of linking themselves with the GoDown, specifically a museum that is supposed to be the first in Africa and the first of an science and technology museum here in Africa. They are seeing the value of connecting themselves and linking themselves to the GoDown now. And then the stronger relations were built within the neighborhood. And this is just the businesses that are around over there. People start to see the value of community and start to see if this little, or no, I don't say little women, but if these girls who are very young can do that and come up with a brilliant, brilliant design. And it now has gone to the government level. The national government is aware of it. That's such an impactful thing. And basically at the end now, you've created a transformed community that for generations to come will have an impact on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Guten Tag. And I'm sorry, my camera was slow warming up, so you didn't see me at the beginning. Garnette, Oluoch-Olunya. And I'll be taking you through the GoDown's Creative Entrepreneurship course, which is actually one of our signature staples, and which we developed over time. You can see there, we started it around 2012, but before that, with partners like Nattverkstan from Sweden, which already had, a program that, that developed for around 10 years, with Goldsmiths, University of London, with Creative England, where, we were invited to visit as they were just setting up creative hubs. We have worked on it. We also went to Sweden and visited, the University of Dance and, and Music. And so it is a course, that we have developed with international partners, but also on the ground, with some of our universities like the Technical University of Kenya, Kenyatta University. And so it's a program that, has matured. As I'm talking about it today, I was just reflecting and thinking we have come, a long way. So the next slide, please. And even as I'm saying we've come a long way, the truth is we have only started to see what we look like. This is a quotation from one of our writers, the late Mbugua. Now, even as I say that, I'm very, very conscious that, of course, art in Africa is a very old thing. But even as it's an old thing, it is also a very new thing. And that is one of the things that I'm going to be looking at. The fact that, creativity rejuvenates itself, reinvents itself constantly. And the picture that, this colorful image that I'm sharing just now, these are actually local artists, from Kenya. There is Sauti Sol is one of our musical groups. Tandiwe Murio, the one who's done these colorful pictures in the bottom right-hand corner, is, one of our young photographers. And, there's different, Modoni Drama Queen in the center is one of, the really, really innovative musicians that we have. Have the next slide, please. Now, when we started working on the course, we were looking to anchor it, in sound, theoretical practice. And so we found that the book, Creating Minds, An Anatomy of Creativity, through the lives of Freud, Einstein, Picasso, Stravinsky, Eliot, Martha Graham, and Mahatma Gandhi, became a very, very useful text for us. Howard Gardner has really explored, the different aspects of creativity. And of course, he came up with the realization that a single variety of creativity is a myth. And so in using some of his ideas around the creative process, we localized and came up with our own, artist life cycles that we could use during the course. And so you can see there on the slide that we actually had artists like Jack Katarikawe, who's a visual artist, Nameless, who's one of our musicians, And then we also organized artist visits to visual artists like Patrick Mukabi, who was actually then based at the GoDown, but then went off to set up another organization called Das Depot. And then we also looked at case studies from different aspects of the arts. And I've put down there Mambo Pambo. This is a fashion designer who has done quite well locally. And, you know, in looking at or in using the life or the work of Howard Gardner, you know, one of the things that is remarkable about him as a scholar is that he has been open to exploration himself. Now, he's a pianist, for instance. He started off as an historian before psychology had developed as a discipline. And when it did, he actually did his PhD in psychology and has enjoyed, you know, explorations in projects in other areas, at the end of which he then advanced some of the ideas that you find in this book. And the major idea advanced in this book, Creating Minds, is that of multiple intelligences. And he says we use this as a tool. The goal is not to be multiply intelligent, but to explore the ideas around you, what you already have. And so with the GoDown, we decided to, you know, expand on the ways in which our artists already had unique qualities and, you know, which they then began to explore during the course. Now, of course, each artistic journey may start and end at a different point. So, you know, the ages varied in terms of the participants. Now, this is just, you know, an illustration of what the life cycle actually looks like in its simplest iteration. And you know, here you find that the artist starts by finding their voice. Then they go on to the formative years. There's an interaction, you know, with their domain. And here's the point where you might get public recognition. You then develop your skills further to the mastery level, and then you get, you know, to the turning point. And for each artist, we found that, of course, their journeys were unique. The other thing I wanted to point out was that in terms of the teaching on the course, we used the mode of facilitation. The facilitators were drawn from the sector, and in many ways, they also, you know, learned on the program and also shared their processes. And if we needed any additional, you know, help, we did bring, you know, visitors, additional facilitators and guests as needed. And, you know, this is one of the ways in which the GoDown has always worked, that it is open to collaborating with others. And this is actually one of Howard Gardner's models, you know, where you have the individual talent interacting with the domain and the field. And this really is just the bare model of the life cycle one that I've just shared. Now, if you're wondering why we were setting up our own course in Kenya, one of the things that went out of the education, you know, system was arts. It was felt that, you know, we needed STEM, we needed the sciences. And so art was actually kicked out of schools. And so the artists were really struggling, and most of them would identify as self-taught. And it's only now that, you know, we are trying to implement a new system, the competency-based curriculum, that's attempting to bring the arts back. And so the GoDown course really did fill a gap that was very necessary. And of course, even on the public stage, we are also trying to develop you know, institutions at the tertiary levels, the Tibet institutions, to then take on a lot of the young artists that are going to go through the primary program. Now, even as we were doing this, of course, we were very, very aware of the technological turn. I remember when we first started our courses, it was very funny. You know, we had the major points we wanted to make. And then at the end of the session, you'd have, you know, the techie coming to tell them, okay, now you can use computers to do A, B, C, and D. But of course, everything has now shifted. And, technology is what is driving everything. And indeed, in 2013, Howard Gardner wrote a new book looking at the ways in which the biggest communities in which young people now reside are, of course, online communities. Now, in our art exchange program, which is one of the collaborations that we do, this one we do with the CISP, which is the International Committee for the Development of Peoples. It's actually based in Italy, and with SOMASA, which is the Somali Academy of Arts and Science. We found, because a lot of times, you think of Somalia might be as, it doesn't have proper systems in place because there's been war there and, for a long time. But when the young people came in, we were amazed because we found that they were actually totally dependent on their phones, not just to do their artwork, but to communicate and to do everything else. And this has developed, it's skills they've developed in the absence of other infrastructures in their country. And so, they were digital natives already. And so one of the other things that we developed from this interaction is an openness. You never know who you're going to meet and how you're going to interact. And of course, even as we are thinking that, we are being open to the digital, AI, artificial intelligence comes in. And so, we've been grappling, I think since last year, with the organization Cube that Joy mentioned, with how we take artificial intelligence on board, for a lot of our graphic artists, for instance. Already the ship has already sailed, you can access programs that do things instantly. So, how do we develop an ethical dimension? How do we develop trust, in the use of digital media? What kind of place, does it play in our lives, or do we just become cyborg and, roll with the punches? So these are just some of the really, really interesting things. Now, of course, one of the reasons we actually got into devising this program, the Creative Entrepreneurship course, was because the GoDown hosts artists, and a lot of them were actually having trouble, just paying rent. You could see that, the whole idea of managing money, how do they manage money? And so money and meaning was again one of the tools, and this was actually well developed. Nat Vexton had been using it, and so we also took it up, for the benefit of our artists, so that they're able to, sell a painting, but then also plan for the money that comes out of the selling of the painting. Improve their skills, be self-sustaining with the incomes that they're already earning. So it became, a cornerstone of the course that we were sharing. And so very briefly, I'll just share some of the outcomes since we started the program. And, one of the things it has done on the ground is that it has contributed to the development of the curriculum. And this is not just at the GoDown, that the GoDown has been invited by, some of our universities, the Technical University, the Cooperative University, to help them in developing their programs. Barnard University invited one of us, Joy, as Gildersleeve professor, to help them again develop their own curriculum over there. And of course, with Nat Vexton, we've always had a sharing relationship. And then another outcome is that we've had successful exchanges through Art Exchange, where the impact has been felt regionally. We revisit constantly, and in places like Somalia, the changes that we see in the way that the artists are practicing are very, very satisfying. Some of our own artists we've followed for over 15 years, and sustainability is actually one of the really, really powerful things that we're able to see. And of course, when we started off the perception was that, you know, the arts sector is not an organized sector, that, you know, people just kind of do their own thing. But since then, we have established the Creative Economy Working Group, CUBE, which Joy again referred to. And I feel this is actually one of the major achievements, because over 25 organizations are actually members. You know, this is where we have our conversation. This is where we also do our planning. And of course, a major outcome is that, you know, has relevant and is now rebuilding. So I'll leave it there and hand you over to Joy. Thank you.